Hey, how's it going? Jasper from Idea here. In today's intro video, let me walk you guys through how to navigate the Idea app and also how to use the different modes in Idea to help you generate 3D models, generate new textures for that 3D model, use AI inpainting and upscaling, and also all the blending options to help you refine the texture before you export the 3D model into a 3D engine or 3D software of your choice so you can use them in your animation, in your games, any project that needs 3D assets. So without further ado, let's jump straight into it. So when you first come onto our platform, you'll be able to see a project dashboard. But if you're new, you always want to start a new project by either bringing in your own model or start with our 3D model generator. There are three ways that you can generate a model. The first one is AI image to 3D workflow. With AI image to 3D workflow, you start with your text prompt, so you can generate your preview image. You can also add an optional reference image, a sketch image to guide that generation. And once you have gotten the generated preview image, if you're happy, you can straight away give it a name and start generating the model and also create a new project with that model. Or if you're not happy, you can use the regenerate button to use the exact same prompt, exact same sketch image to regenerate until you are happy, and then you can start a new project with it. The second way is actually to use the second tab, which is upload image to 3D, where you bring in your own image and use that image to generate the 3D model and start a new project. And the third way is via your recently generated AI images. So you won't be able to see the third tab if you're new because you don't have any prior history of AI generated images. But if you do, you can always reuse them to start a new project with. I have already queued up two model generation on my project dashboard. So I think they're finished, and let's jump right into the model that I have generated with this image. Okay, now you're in the editor. So let's start from the top navigation bar. First, you have an option to go back to the project dashboard, and you also have an option to go into our Discord channel for help and also community engagement. Then you have a checkpoint saver. So please do remember to save checkpoints often for your progress, because you can always revert back to a previous checkpoint and see all of your work, all of your texture layers at that moment. There's no limitation on how many checkpoints you can do, so do save them quite often. And with the generated model, if you're happy, you can just straight away use export button to export the model or export the UV texture. Okay. Now let's start with the three modes that you currently will be able to see on the editor side. First is blend. This is the default view where you can preview the 3D model on one side and also see all the UV textures that's currently attached to the model. And you'll probably start with only one layer if you started with the generated model. And with projection and in-paint mode, you also have a 3D viewport, but you also have extra AI generation panel that's going to be used for generating new texture layers, which I will go through in a bit how to use them. Let's go back to the blend mode. By clicking on this information button, you'll be able to see how to navigate the 3D canvas, the 3D viewport. And with the blend mode, you always want to click on a UV layer, which you can also drag to reorder the layers so they show up in different orders on the 3D model. We'll get to that when you have more layers. You'll also be able to hide this layer where you can see the model now don't have a texture. You'll be also able to highlight this current layer by hiding all other layers, which you will see in a bit when we have more layers. And by clicking on a layer, it basically goes into a editable state. The default mode currently is to move around the model, but if you switch to the eraser, you can actually use the eraser to remove the texture from this current UV layer you just selected. You can undo this eraser by either using the mask or use this clear mask button to kind of reset everything. With the layer, with the drop down button, you can either upscale this current layer to 2K or 4K. So if you're happy with the initially generated the texture, but you just want them to be more high definition, this is a great way to do it right away. You can also download that one layer, or you can do more modification, for example, rename the layer, duplicate the layer, and delete the layer. So this is blend mode. We'll get to that in a bit, how to use them along with projection mode and also in paint mode. Now let's go into projection mode. Use projection when you want to rework the texture completely or at a very large scale, because essentially what it does is to regenerate a new texture for this model from different camera angles. With projection, you would be able to see the first, we will have one projection ready for you. That's basically one camera view of this model on this particular canvas. We're using depth under the hood. That's why we are showing a depth map of this model, because for projection, the current layer, the texture doesn't really matter. All you want to do is to enable multiple projections in different angles and set them up in the canvas, so you can generate new texture layers from different camera angles on this model. So for example, now I have two projection. One is facing the front, one is facing the back. So with these, generally, I can start generating new texture layers for this particular model. With a single click, you'll be able to select each projection as the active selection, where you can move it around, scale it, and zoom it in and out. By clicking on a different projection, now you'll be able to do transform that particular projection. And now once you have set up the projections, you can now put in your prompt, and now I can set the generation count to 2, so I get 2 variation back, so I can choose. Now we see that our generation has finished, and I quite like the right hand one, and so I'll select that and add new layer based on this generation. And you will see that there are 2 layers added. The reason is because for each projection, we actually generate a texture layer from that angle. And you also see that on the side, there are no texture. There is like a gap. That is because we only selected 2 projection as the base camera angle to generate new texture layers. So if you really want to cover the whole model, you probably want to do multiple angles. And then so you can cover the gap. Or you can use AI inpainting later to fill in the details. With the new layers added, you can also drag it around to see which layer is currently on top. And you can use the highlight button to see which layer is responsible for which angle. What you can also do next is also do a multi-select and also flatten the 2 layers into one layer. Our app currently only supports 7 layers, so constantly combining different layers into one is a great way to manage the layer count. But obviously, please do remember to always save checkpoints before you do like very, very big changes. That will help you to undo the changes later on. So yeah, let's hide these new flattened layer because that's all you need to know for projection. Let's move on to the paint mode. Paint mode is probably the most useful and also the most complex to navigate around. This is where you edit the texture details based on the existing texture layer, existing texture on the model. You don't have to select any active layers when working with these. You simply can go into a brush mode where you can paint over the 3D model, and that will become the mask for the AI inpainting to work. You can also remove the brush stroke by using the eraser, or you can also use clear all button to clear all the masks. You can adjust the sizing of the mask, the feather of the mask, and opacity of the mask to improve the blending of the newly generated layer. So play around with all the options until you get the results that you need. And there are also 2 modes for the brush. One involves color, one does not involve color, which you can see there's a checkbox on the AI generation panel. So with the checkbox checked, the brush color matters. Basically, the new texture will be generated based on the color information you have provided via the brush stroke. But if you uncheck that, which is the default, and you use a white brush, the white does not mean that it's going to turn out white. It simply just means it doesn't take color into account. All it does is, based on the prompt and also the mask, it kind of fill in the details with the brush mask. So now let's give it an example first, without any color information, I brush over the face, and I entered my prompt, which is a chibi style adventure in an angry facial expression. And I have the generation count set to 2 and the redo strength set to 70. That sounds, play around with the redo strength. That basically helps you define how closely you want the newly generated texture layer to follow the previous texture you currently have. So now I have generated 2 variations, and I quite like the one on the right. So I'm gonna click on that, add new layers, and you see that the layer has been added. But there are some unwanted bits that I want to remove. This is where the blend mode comes into play. I can go into blend mode and use eraser with some feather to kind of remove the part of that newly generated texture layer, the facial expression layer, and remove that and show the texture, the original texture underneath, to kind of blend the 2 texture layers together. And now let's do an example with color information in. So let's say I want to do a new detail on the top of the helmet, and I want to do a 2 heart emoji. I want to have 2 heart emoji as kind of like a stamp on top of the helmet. So I will use 2 red brushstroke, use the yellow as the base layer to paint over the original kind of like an onigiri shape texture. And then on top of it, I will use a red brushstroke to paint a rough silhouette of 3 heart. And with the text prompt, I simply put 3 heart emoji on the helmet. And by pressing generate, I got 2 variations back. And I quite like the second one. So I click on that, add new layers, and that's been added to my UV layer panel. Obviously, it has some artifacts that I want to remove. Now I'll go back to blend mode again and remove all the artifacts that I don't want from this texture layer. This is how you use inpaint mode, the paint mode, to generate new details or edit details on the texture. And also how you use blend mode to kind of blend these newly generated details together with the old layer. Remember to save your work, save a new checkpoint. And once you're happy, simply export the model out with this new texture. You can also just export the UV texture instead of exporting the entire model. That's also fine. And you'll be able to see that before we export, we actually flatten all the not on your project, but we actually do on under the hood to kind of combine all the layers you currently have in your project into one texture file, so you can download them. And this is it. This is an intro video on how you use IDEA to generate, paint, refine 3D assets for your games or animation or any projects that needs 3D assets. Let us know what kind of tutorials you want us to produce, what kind of use case you have in mind with this tool. Definitely give it a try. Join our Discord for discussion and support. And this is Jasper from Ideate. Until next time, ciao.